Before Illinois lawmakers decide whether to legalize today's high-potency marijuana, they need to hear from you. And before you speak with them, you should be armed with the facts about present-day marijuana. Your family and friends should also be made aware of the dangers and problems associated with recreational marijuana. So it's good that you are here tonight. Illinois is on a collision course with marijuana. What can we do to avoid the crash? Our speaker tonight has insights and answers. Jo McGuire is chairman of the board of the National Drug and Alcohol Screening Association. She was appointed to serve on the Colorado Governor's Marijuana Task Force. As a native of Colorado, Ms. McGuire has firsthand knowledge about the impact that 5 years of legal pot is having in her home state. She would advise our lawmakers to visit Colorado before they decide on marijuana in Illinois. To use part of a line from an old Grateful Dead song, is Illinois ready for a long, strange trip with marijuana? Here's Jo McGuire with the answer.
Thank you, Monty. Thank you, Dave. Illinois Family Institute has hosted me this week, and it's just been a wonderful experience. So I appreciate all y'all have done for me. And it's good to be here with you. I feel very passionate about this topic for several reasons. I'm a Denver native, and I've lived in Colorado Springs, Colorado for 28 years, and I have watched a shift in my own community and in my state. I come at this from a professional background of workplace drug and alcohol testing, specifically DOT employees who are under federal requirements to do drug testing for, we call 49 CFR Part 40. So, how many of you want to fly in an airplane where your pilot is stoned? We all agree on that one, no matter what you think about marijuana. So this program is where your airline pilots, your big rig truck drivers, train engineers, they have mandatory drug testing under federal rules. You know, it's interesting that we have those rules in place because of some disasters we had in this country, many of them involving marijuana. Do any of you remember the Chase, Maryland Conrails incident many years ago where we had over 24 people killed on their way to work in the morning because the train crashed? You know, that operator was operating that train under the influence of marijuana. And it was one of the most significant factors that caused Congress to put these mandatory rules into place for Department of Transportation. So that's my professional background is policy writing, workplace drug and alcohol policy writing and enforcement and drug and alcohol testing. So, you know, I want to talk about neighborhood impacts of retail marijuana, and I'm going to actually stand over here a little bit because I want you all to be able to see the slides, but I'm a walker and a talker, so I move around a little bit, and that's what I'm most comfortable with. There we go. All right, so a lot of the information that I'm going to share with you, you'll see some charts and graphs. It will come from the Colorado Rocky Mountain HIDTA report. HIDTA is spelled HIDTA. It's an acronym for High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. That's a mouthful. The website, you will want the website. It's rmhidta.org. You can go to that website. You can obtain this report. It's about 170 plus pages. It's set out in chapters by topic. I've worked on this report. I've worked with Tom Gorman and his team, a fabulous group of people who are committed to outlining the concerns we have with the outcomes that we're seeing in Colorado. How this got started was, you may or may not have heard of the Ogden memo and the Cole memo that was issued several years ago by different attorney generals in the U.S., stating that first with medical marijuana, as long as you keep the rules, as long as you stay within these boundaries, well, the federal government will kind of look the other way. And then with Eric Holder, when Colorado legalized recreational marijuana, Eric Holder sent out a memo known as the Holder Memo. And it says if you follow these particular rules, we'll look the other way, we'll leave you alone. And so we had some criteria. The criteria is keep it out of the hands of kids, keep it within the state of Colorado. You know, let's make sure we're not having an increase in traffic fatalities. You have to have that under control, these types of things. Well, immediately we started seeing that those rules were getting broken left and right. And they weren't just getting slightly bended. They were being crushed. And so Rocky Mountain HIDA started tracking data and just going to people and getting data. Mind you, we started this legalization process without any implemented data tracking by the state of Colorado. Illinois will do the same thing. So we don't intentionally track this data. We've had to do it incidentally. And that's really tough because then we end up struggling with the criteria that lawmakers would need to make significant changes. But this thing packs a wallop, and you'll see that as we go. So I think, Ben, did I change it last time or did you? You're changing my slides for me? All right, I'll just use this as a pointer, not a clicker. Okay, so one of the first things that we really saw that caused alarm was we heard as voters tax, regulate, control, get that money that goes into the coffers, but this thing will be tightly controlled, and that's the way that you get a grip on this, right? Because otherwise everything's in the black market. Well, the first thing we saw is that we set no limit on the amount of establishments that could operate. And so right away in Denver proper, remember, in Colorado, our communities could opt out of retail marijuana. Personal use is legal in the whole state. Personal home grows are legal in the whole state. But retail marijuana, your city or county had to opt in. 2/3 of the communities in Colorado said, no, thank you. Are you aware of that? Most people have never heard that. 2/3 of the community said, no, thank you, including mine. But Denver went all in. Pueblo went all in. Are we surprised that Boulder went all in? Right? So these communities are mostly along the I-25 corridor where the major population groups are in Colorado. A few ski communities. Some said, no, thank you, we want to be family-oriented, but some said, hey, we think we should have a party environment. But by and large, it's the major population centers. So in Denver alone, in the first year of retail marijuana, we had over 390 establishments. That was almost twice the amount of McDonald's and Starbucks. And by the way, I went through and I counted this up myself and gave this data to HIDA for the report. And I said we could throw in Walmarts and we could throw in Walgreens and still have more marijuana establishments. We have enough marijuana produced in Colorado for every man, woman, and child to use marijuana 24/7 for 3 years. So you tell me that we are controlling this substance, right? Actually, we're just perpetuating and creating as much pot as we can. So Ben, let's go to the next one. So not only do we have the many establishments, we have a broad array of types of establishments. Here in my community, where we said we do not want retail, we have gas and grass stations. So if you can see, that's a gas station. It's gas and grass by Native Roots. There's a guy out on the street corner, if you can see him. He's got one of those signs up that says, buy one, get one free or whatever. So we have that going on all over our community. And I don't really know how they get away with this because gas is federally regulated. How they sell pot along with their gas, I'm not really sure. But we have 2 of these in my community. And I'll tell you something, this really upsets people because they'll say, that's not what we intended. And I can get that colleagues of mine are upset by this because, you tend to birds of a feather, right, flock together. So what really surprised me was I was invited to speak at one of our colleges in town. And they said, we want to have a conversation about this, so we'd like you to come and sit in the commons with students for 4 hours and just have ongoing conversations with the students about this topic. So I thought, you know what, they're gonna attack me, they're gonna beat me up, but somebody has to tell them the truth. So I walked up to the registration desk and I said, my name's Jo McGuire. I'm here for the conversation today in the Commons. And the girl behind the desk, a young woman, college student, she says, okay, what is up with this gas and grass station? What are you going to do about it? We need to get rid of this. This is ridiculous. That's not what we intended. So I thought, really? I have a college student that is against legal marijuana? So I'm thinking, I got one. It's two against, however many. Guess what? This girl's pro-pot, and she says, I use every Friday night. I love marijuana. I use it all the time. But that is out of control. That is ridiculous. That is mocking the intent of legal marijuana. So I found that fascinating, really interesting. We can go to the next one, Ben. So the other thing I want to talk about that we're seeing in neighborhoods is you look at this home on the screen. This is in Douglas County, Colorado. It's the city of Castle Rock. It's a little more affluent community in Colorado. It's in between Colorado Springs and Denver. And this home is valued between $3.5 and $5 million. It's upper end. It's in a gated community. A very nice place to live. What do you notice about the picture of this home that you see there? What was that? Oh my gosh, there's police cars out front. What's going on with there? Ben, let's go to the next slide. This is the site of one of the largest pot busts in the state of Colorado. So what's happening here is we are told as voters we're going to tax and regulate and control this, and yet at the same time, we're going to allow adults to grow marijuana in their homes, 5 plants per adult over 21. So my husband and I could have 10 plants in our home. Illinois has the same plant limit. Okay, so most people don't understand that a healthy marijuana plant these days can grow a minimum of a pound of pot per harvest. And then, because of technology and chemicals and all these wonderful things, we now can get 3 to 4 harvests a year. And I'm being conservative. So let's say that my husband and I, we each have our 5 plants. That's 10 plants. We get 10 pounds per harvest. We get 4 harvests. That's 40 pounds of pot per year for the 2 of us. And we had a police officer in our audience last night, and I asked him, I said, would you consider that a lot of pot? And he was like, well, yeah. That's a lot of pot. That's more than we could use if we used it continuously for the entire season, for the entire year. So what's happening to that marijuana? That is a black market that we've created. Well, we're calling it a gray market. So we've created this entire system to completely undercut the tax scheme. This isn't taxed. This isn't regulated. This isn't controlled. You want people coming in your house and telling you what you can grow and when and where and how? No. But yet, that's part of legal marijuana. So what's that about? Does that sound like a tax and regulate system to you? So this story comes into play. We have these huge homes in these gated communities, and we have cartels from other countries coming in, paying cash, buying up these houses, gutting them on the inside, bringing in slave labor, human trafficking, setting up massive grow operations, and then we have gang wars, cartel wars happening in our gated communities with weapons, guns, and then they turn each other in to put each other out of business. So these people got busted, and you see Monument PD says the biggest pot bust they have ever seen in a home. And so if you think, it's just a little pot, what's the big deal? Control it, regulate it. There's actually something else at play here, and I want you to understand what's really going on. That's not just in Castle Rock. That's in Colorado Springs, that's in Denver, that's in Pueblo. This is all throughout our state. I've heard from one of our attendees in this week that I've been here, they are already seeing this happen in Illinois. So it's not going to be brand new to you. People are already setting up and establishing and preparing. By the way, I haven't mentioned this in any other presentation, so Dave, I'm sorry, this is new information. But when these houses get gutted like this, it completely ruins the property and the property value. Mold, mildew, reroute the electric system, the HVAC system. This is not covered by insurance. So if you're a homeowner and you have rental properties and you rent to people who decide to set up a grow operation and they destroy your property and move out, happens all the time, your insurance company says, I'm sorry, that's a Schedule I substance. It's your responsibility to make sure that never happened. Zero coverage. And you are left cleaning up the mess. My next door neighbor is a real estate agent. And I just met her. It's a new house. We just moved in last year, so I'm meeting the new neighbors. And I said, what do you do? She said, I'm a real estate agent. And she said, what do you do? That's always touchy. I don't know these people. And I said, well, I travel around the country and I talk about the impact of legal marijuana in Colorado. And she goes on a tirade. I hate that stuff. You should see how many houses it has completely ruined and how much money we lose in this industry. So it's just a side note. Let's go ahead and move on, Ben. Another thing I want you to understand is that we keep hearing that this will be the answer for keeping minorities and low-income people out of jail and will infuse their communities with cash. So here we have, and this is just one sliver of an example, we have a low-income neighborhood, the Swansea neighborhood in Denver, that says we are being absolutely overran with an overabundance of marijuana pot shops in our neighborhood, and yet we are kept out of the opportunity to profit economically or be involved in the entrepreneurial aspect of this. So that's wrong, and that's targeting us and taking advantage of us. In addition to that, arrests of minorities in the state of Colorado have gone up. So when you hear this, we're going to keep minorities out of jail and we're going to stop all these people going to jail for marijuana offenses, our law enforcement says all we do is respond to calls about marijuana. And we never have before this legalization started. It just wasn't on the radar because we already had decriminalization, so do you. But now we're creating issues that are just draining our law enforcement of resources. So let's go to the next one. I want you to get a little picture, if you can see this very well. To your left, you'll see two photographs of what cannabis used to look like back in the 60s and 70s. One strain is a sativa plant, the other one is an indica plant. I'm going to explain that in a moment. And on the right, you have a marijuana plant that grows in today's culture. We call them trees, okay? These are the things that are growing in Colorado. They have to be cut down with chainsaws. I was on a tour of a marijuana facility last April, and the Marijuana Enforcement Division took some of us in to look at this facility. It was the second largest grow operation in the state of Colorado in downtown Denver. And I was there with a group of law enforcement who wanted to learn more about this. And as we're walking through the facility, we get into a room where there are some mature plants. Before this, we had seen all the seedlings and all this stuff. And I look at this plant, and I'm just standing there gawking, and this young kid who's the owner, he proudly walks up to me. He's like, pretty impressive, huh? These things are being propped up by two-by-fours, and the buds, the flowers, which are normally this big, you could see on the left, they're about this big if you get close, like the size of a small pine cone. They are from my shoulder to the tips of my fingers. And I felt like I was in some kind of a monster movie where everything, is made large. I said, I've never seen anything like this. He goes, that's nothing. He said, in the other room, I've got them that are head to toe as tall as you are, but I'm not going to let you go back there because that's all, like secret, and don't let people go in there and visit that room. What I want you to understand about this is that in the 60s and 70s, the potency on those plants was about 1 to 3% THC. THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, is the psychoactive ingredient in pot that makes you high. So when we got to the late 70s, the early 80s, we started seeing THC potency at about 5%. When it crossed 5%, that's when we had the first cases of cannabis dependence disorder. That's addiction. It's listed in the DSM-5. Can you remind me what the DSM-5, let's see, it's the Diagnostic Standard Manual. Thank you. Perfect. And that is the criteria for how you treat mental health and addiction disorders. And it is listed as a disorder for treatment. So even though society denies that marijuana is addictive, we know very well in the treatment world that it's a classified disorder in our standard manuals. And this has been known for years, and for many of us, we say it's not even a debate. But we know in the general public it's still a debate. Okay, so 5% addictive. When Colorado legalized in 2012, our mayor was on the radio saying, folks, marijuana is now at 15 to 17% THC. We can't do this. This is extraordinary. This is, more powerful than we've ever seen before. Now, before I tell you what we're currently dealing with, I want you to know something. In most of Europe and in Amsterdam, marijuana over 15% THC is illegal. They are only allowed to go up to 15%. Anything over 15 is considered a hard drug on par with heroin. That's not legal. Everything else is decriminalized, okay? So what did our law say in Colorado, Amendment 64? By the way, we amended our state constitution for legal marijuana. So we're going to have a very hard time changing this thing. But what we said in our state constitution is we will allow 100% THC. Well, when some of us read that language, because you have to understand, the people of Colorado didn't beg for legal marijuana and demand it. The marijuana industry brought this to our state. And they collected signatures, and they got on college campuses, and you'll hear it was a mandate of the people. Completely untrue. Regardless, I digress. So immediately we said, we've got to limit these THC potencies, and the industry said, okay, come on, look. You guys are all worried about nothing. You can't grow marijuana over 20%. It's impossible. The plant breaks down naturally. You just can't do it. Remember the tour I told you about a few minutes ago? So we're on this tour, and this little guy is bragging to us about how he just got raw cannabis back from the lab at 30% THC. You cannot find cannabis in Colorado under 25, 30% THC. You cannot do it. So now we have these potencies that are higher than we've ever seen before. And if that wasn't enough, let's go to the next slide. The next thing we find out is we've got vape cartridges that drop into a vape pen. So if you know what e-cigarettes are, vaporizers, we have these THC cartridges. And so how I found out about this is I was doing drug testing with a colleague, and she was the intake coordinator for a nursing school. And they always did pre-enrollment drug tests on their students. You can't get into nursing school if you're using drugs. So we did all of those drug tests. And then she called me one day and she said, Jo, something weird is happening here. My students are going out for break and they're standing outside in the smokers area. They're allowed to use their vape pens and e-cigarettes out there. And they're coming back into class. And I got to tell you, there's something wrong with half these kids. They can't stay awake. They're falling asleep. They're acting like they're stoned. Could there be something in those cigarettes? And I said, well, I can't think of anything. That sounds weird to me. I don't know. And she said, look, I need you to research this for me. I'm in drug testing. I don't have time to research e-cigarettes, But I had a friend who worked at the American Lung Association in Denver, and I called him up. And I said, Bob, does this make any sense to you? And he says, oh, hold on a second. I need you to check your email. So open my email, and he has these pictures of indica, sativa, and a hybrid blend cartridge that drop into the e-cigarette. These are THC. And I was shocked. I had no idea. These are the #1 selling product in the state of Colorado. They're 50 servings per pen, per cartridge. The potency on these things, 40, 50, 60% THC. The thing that's really concerning is you don't smell the pot. There's flavor drops that go in, and because of the way that it emits the steam or the vapors, you don't smell it. People are smoking right in front of you at baseball games, in your neighborhood, neighbors sitting on the back porch trying to enjoy a nice summer night. Your next door neighbors are puffing and puffing and puffing. It's everywhere. I also show you the Puffit that's up there on the top left. This was featured in the Cannabist. The Cannabist is a division, a newspaper that's a division of the Denver Post. It's related to all things marijuana. The Puffit was featured in the Cannabist as a way that you could get away with smoking pot right under your boss's nose at work by pretending you have an asthma inhaler, but you're actually taking in THC. Now, when you look at the bottoms of these cartridges, indica and sativa, you can't see the S on the far right, but it's S-A-T-I-V-A. So indica is the strain of cannabis that calms you down, chills you out. You think a stoner. Get the munchies and fall asleep and we're all good. We're not hurting anybody else. Sativa, on the other hand, is the strain of marijuana that amps you up, gets your heart racing, gets people agitated, increased risk of heart attack after use. People with underlying mental health disorders have a tendency to have psychotic break if they overindulge in sativa. We're seeing an increase in mental health disorders. So what happens when you take these strains of marijuana, you liquefy them, and then you amp up the potency greater than we've ever seen before? So let's go to the next slide. Now, how many? The middle one is a hybrid blend. It's a mixture. Still hyperpotent. Yep. Okay, how many of you have ever heard of dabs? A couple people have heard of me speak before. So, so the majority of you have no idea what I'm talking about. This is a product in Colorado, extremely popular. They have a high rate of sales in Colorado. These are butane hash oil extracts. We call them concentrates. And this product goes by several different names: ice, wax, dab, shatter. There's many different names. Essentially, this is extracted with butane and a blowtorch. That's a great combination for someone who's stoned, right? And what you see, that silver piece that you see there, that is a 16-penny nail. So you know the size of a 16-penny nail. That amount of product right there is about the size of the tip of my fingernail. Now, the marijuana industry likes to brag that one hit of dabs is equal to about 26 hits of a traditional joint. Hyper potent. We have dabs that are at 60, 70, 80, 90, 95% THC. These are so dangerous to the marijuana naive user, that's someone who's never tried marijuana before, that we have a public service campaign that says if you've never tried it before, start low, go slow. This will render you unconscious. So we have, is this necessary? Is this what you think of when you think of pot? I got to tell you, if we have time, I'll share with you a little bit of my story. But I have a son who is very committed to marijuana. He's currently drug-free. But he's been out of Colorado for many, many years, and he recently came back into the state. He has not experienced legal marijuana until he stopped using. He comes back into the state, and he says to me, and let me tell you, he still thinks marijuana is good, but raw marijuana, like a joint. He says to me, why is this necessary? Why do people have to get that high? The regular stuff gets you high. Why do you need to be higher than that? You know, he is angry about this because he says this ruins the idea. And that's from someone who loves pot. Now, let me tell you something. When we legalized marijuana in Colorado, we didn't know about this. We were clueless. This happened within the first few months. For your state, this is a part of the definition of marijuana in the law. And so when Colorado discovered this was going on, and you can go to the next slide, Ben, when we discovered waxes and dabs, and these are several different varieties of what that looks like, our lawmakers immediately said, okay, well, that can't be legal. You know, that's like cocaine versus crack. It's freebasing. That's what it is. Matter of fact, boy, they're getting all the good stuff, Dave. I was listening to a radio program as I was driving home from work 2 years ago, and Tommy Chong, you guys all know who Tommy Chong is, right? Cheech and Chong. Yeah, sadly. I say this in high schools and I get blank stares. Nobody knows what I'm talking about, so I've had to stop doing that. Yeah, right? So I'm listening to the radio, and there's this big announcement. Tommy Chong is investing in legal marijuana in Pueblo, Colorado. It's all the rage. So exciting because he's going to come there and he's going to have this big marijuana store. So these guys are on the radio, and they've got him on the radio, and they're going to interview him. And everyone's all excited, and they say, "So, Tommy, how do you feel about dabs?" And Tommy Chong said, "Dude, nobody should freebase anything, man." Now, if Tommy Chong thinks it's a bad idea, that's really a bad idea. Okay, so here we have these products, and the state of Colorado was like, this certainly can't be legal. Well, the marijuana industry was like, hold up, it is legal, and there's nothing you can do about it. And by the way, my law and every other state that has passed this, and Illinois, will have a clause in this law written by the marijuana industry that says state lawmakers and voters cannot do anything that makes it unreasonably impractical for them to succeed at business. So if you try to do anything that limits their business and makes it unreasonably impractical, then they can sue. So Colorado State said, okay, well, here's the problem. People blow themselves up making butane hash oil extractions. So we can go to the next slide, and you can see we have had extraction labs go straight up. We voted in 2012. We had personal legalization in 2013. 2014 was when we went full-blown retail. And go to the next slide. This is what a hash oil extraction lab blow-up looks like. Completely, utterly destroyed property. When law enforcement goes in, they can't tell the difference between that and a meth lab. And it's not until they get in the investigation phase and they see the chemicals involved, then they can start making sense of it. So what we had the state of Colorado say, well, this isn't safe, but it's legal. So Colorado Department of Public Health, you're going to have to help people do this safer. So our State Department of Health has created what is called a closed loop system to help people make hash extractions safer. So next thing we have are the indoor home grows, which I told you about, mold and mildew. How many of you have ever been to Colorado before? I know a lot of you. Oh, wow. Everybody going to focus on the family or what? Okay, let me ask you something. Did you feel the humidity in Colorado? No, you're looking at me like, what humidity? Most of the time we're 0% humidity. A humid day for us is like 5%. Okay, and what else is unique to Colorado that you don't have? Altitude. Mile High City. Now it means something different, but So Mile High City, we have altitude. We have thinner air. My daughter's an asthmatic. I took her to have an allergy test a few years ago to find out what all she was allergic to. She went really high for molds and mildews. Also cats, but whatever. Can't get her to stop having cats. But so they said no molds and mildews. So I went to a friend of mine who's a property owner, and I said, how do I find mold and mildew in my house? She's having these asthma attacks. What do I do? They said mold and mildew doesn't grow in Colorado. Can you imagine living in a place that doesn't have mold and mildew? Because I grew up in Hammond, Indiana, so I'm familiar. So we don't have mold and mildew in Colorado. It's too dry, the air's too thin, the spores don't survive. Well, cannabis grows in a hot, humid environment, so we have to synthesize a hot, humid environment. The mature marijuana plant takes 6 gallons of water per day to survive. So we now have homes, and I don't know if you can see it very well. Make sure I use the pointer and don't shut this off. But we have homes. This is black mold. You have black mold all here on the floor and up the walls. We have homes that the mold and mildews are growing not only inside the house but outside the house as well. We have people putting in synthetic lighting. You can see any electricians in the room who are shuddering at this picture right here. We've got people hot tapping into the public utilities to steal energy from the city to keep their plants going, rerouting, I think I already mentioned the internal HVAC system. And like I said, this whole part is completely unregulated and uncontrollable. Let's go to the next slide. This is a dump site for butane cans. So here's the hash oil lab extraction blow up, the explosion. And then here are all the butane cans, thousands of empty butane cans. Here are some pesticides, herbicides, many banned substances here. And these are things that are found quite often at these grow sites. We don't have any plan for disposal, safe disposal, hazmat, hazardous waste, any of these things going on. Let's go to the next one. Sure.
Does this pretty much mirror what the state of Washington and Oregon and other states are doing?
Washington and Oregon are preparing their HIDA reports similar to Colorado. What I'll say about Washington and Oregon, first Washington, they started with a smaller referendum that fell under their alcohol control board, and they rolled it out very slowly. But Washington had a very robust medical marijuana system to begin with, and they are seeing the similar outcomes, but they're far behind on the data tracking. So we're expecting the first HIDA report from the state of Washington, I believe, this year. Oregon, on the other hand, has a mess going on because when Oregon started their medical marijuana program, they never kept track of how many people started those establishments, opened them. They have no idea what they already have to begin with. The state. Well, okay, in some cases the state does it, but by and large it's counties and cities. So, for instance, in Colorado, the Marijuana Enforcement Division is responsible for the rules that the state has put together, but what isn't covered and what they can't deal with, it's up to the individual cities. So, you know, there's a really interesting piece to that in that, again, I mentioned the data tracking, but when you look at, let me say, interdictions and seizures. Let me go on because I have a few things to say about that, but I don't want to get too far off track. But that's a great question. I'll pause here and say, in Colorado, the oversight for recreational marijuana is the Colorado Department of Revenue. That's who's responsible for the public health and safety, the money, the inspections, all of that. Colorado Department of Revenue. Okay, so we look at, we're told we're going to eliminate the black market. We're going to keep it in the state. We're going to eliminate the black market. This is a chart of interdictions and seizures that have happened of marijuana going outside of the state of Colorado. And these are the ones that have been caught and recorded. You usually can't get it very easily through the post office, especially if it's very smelly. But FedEx and UPS, they don't have a system for catching this stuff unless it's, you know, like an egregious violation. I want to clarify what some of these arrows are. We have 2009 is what we call the year of commercialization, and then 2013 was the first year of legalization. So what does that mean? So Colorado legalized medical marijuana in 2001, and that's when medical marijuana rolled out. But when it first rolled out, it was limited. And you could only have 3 patients per caregiver, and there was a very limited amount of who could have what. And so you really didn't see it, you didn't hear about it. We only had a few thousand people in the whole state that were registered to have a medical marijuana card. In 2008, the marijuana industry came to the voters and said, people can't get their medicine. We don't have enough. It's not available. It's not fair. So they put forth a referendum to open up availability. And a lot of people thought, and I got to tell you, including me, a lot of people thought they were voting on medical marijuana. Most of our citizens had no idea that we already had a medical marijuana system in place. So this passed. And what happened was in 2009, it exploded. they didn't just make marijuana available to the people who already had their card. It went to unlimited patients per caregiver. So what happened is now retail establishments were able to apply as a caregiver. So that's when we had medical marijuana dispensaries open up, stores, where the store owner, not a doctor, the store owner applies to be a medical marijuana caregiver, and then their unlimited patients can come in and purchase marijuana from them. And that was the year we call commercialization, because that's when we started seeing advertisements, people standing on the street corners, coupons, that kind of thing. And then, of course, we expanded legalization. We voted in 2012. I've already explained that. So let's go to the next one. Average pounds of Colorado marijuana that are seized from interdictions. So we went from roughly 2,700 up to 3,500 from the years of medical up to legal. And you can look at maps of the U.S. and you could see every state in the U.S. that has Colorado marijuana seized, because we have the best stuff in the world, let me tell you. Everybody wants to get a hold of that pot. In fact, San Diego, Haida, down in the southern tip of California, they say the number one product we have coming across the Mexican border is Colorado pot. So we're diverting it to Mexico, repackaging it, lacing it with other substances, and then shipping it back to California. All right, let's go to the next one. Parcels containing marijuana mailed from Colorado to another state. You can see the straight uphill climb. Let's go to the next one. Here's what we call gray market. This is a search I did on Craigslist. Now, I told you, my community said no retail marijuana. So I went to Craigslist and I said, I want to get pot in Colorado Springs. Thousands and thousands of ads came up. There were so many pages, I couldn't even get through them. And all you have to do, so in each state that has marijuana laws, you are allowed to gift another person up to 1 ounce of marijuana for free, as long as you don't ask for remuneration. So you can't sell it to them, but you can give it to them as a gift. Now I just want to clarify what 1 ounce of marijuana is, okay? An ounce of pot, we think of a little baggie, like you kind of see in the movies. But an ounce of marijuana can make up to 65 joints, okay? We keep hearing it's just a little pot. It's anything but a little pot. All right, so you can give someone up to 65 joints worth of loose grass, but you can also do this in edibles and concentrates and all these other things, but let's forego that. An ounce of pot for free, 60 joints. So let's go to the next slide. People have gotten smart, and they've decided we're going to set up a little delivery system. And you call me and you ask for your free donation in a fourth or an eighth or a half, and I'll bring you however much pot you want, and I'm giving it to you for free because I've never met you and I'm just good-hearted. But you're going to reimburse me gas money to the tune of $50, $75, $80, depending on how much pot I brought you. Completely against the law, but guess what our lawmakers say? Well, it's not really legal and it's not really illegal, so, we don't know that there's a lot we can do about it. Let me ask you this. How is that taxed? That's tax-free. So again, we're undercutting the tax regulate and control while we have this quote-unquote gray market. Okay, let's go to the next one. All right. I just went 1 week when I put this presentation together, and I looked up news stories that had happened in the last week in Colorado. Now, remember, we're 5 years into legal retail marijuana. So why do we continue to have illegal grows busted, second largest in Pueblo County, marijuana bust in northeast Colorado Springs, 180 pot plants pulled from a house? Down here on the bottom left, here kind of in the middle, you have a sting where all of those people, those are mugshots of all the people that were involved in an illegal marijuana grow, manufacturing, shipping operation that was distributing to the rest of the country. If it's legal, aren't we getting rid of these problems? It happens every week, every week, every week, every week. Let's go to the next one. All right, Colorado crime, we keep hearing crime has gone down in Colorado. So what's interesting about that is we found that those in the marijuana industry, and I say that term over and over again, you're going to keep hearing me, you're probably like, what in the world is she talking about? There are big three major groups behind marijuana legalization: NORML, the National Organization to Reform Marijuana Laws, the Drug Policy Alliance, and the Marijuana Policy Project. Those are the big three. There's a few little baby ones now, but those are the big dogs. Fully funded by George Soros, and the agenda is to legalize across the nation. They bring these laws to our states. So they said crime is down in Colorado. What they did was they looked at crime, and they found 3 nonviolent crimes that had gone down, and they published. What they left out was that all violent crimes had gone up and most nonviolent crimes. So we've seen this increase in property crimes, we've seen this increase in violent crimes, what I would call significant. And my district attorney in my community says the only thing legal marijuana has brought Colorado Springs is homicide. We've never seen a homicide rate like we have in our town. And listen, he doesn't say that because it's unrelated. He says it because these are marijuana-related deaths that are homicides because people are robbing each other and shooting each other over pot. Let's go to the next one. Prevalence of past 30-day marijuana use in youth ages 12 to 17 years old. So you have over here on the left the average in the United States, you have the average in Colorado, and then you have the average in Denver Metro by year. And Denver is actually higher than even the Colorado State average. Now, go to the next one. Here we have the national survey. This is use for high school and middle students in Colorado. Our high school senior rate is 27.8%. Is that very much? Well, let me tell you. We had some gentlemen out looking at legal pot from Sweden, and they do drug and alcohol prevention in Sweden, and they wanted to make a study, so they stayed a few weeks, and they went to all the schools, and they went to the Colorado Department of Education, and they said, what is your average student use rate? And we pulled out these numbers, and these guys just about had a stroke. And we said, what is the average rate amongst high school seniors in Sweden? And they said, we've been panicking because it's 2%. 2%. 27.8%, over a quarter of our high school seniors say I use pot regularly. And by the way, regularly back in the day used to mean monthly, and then 10 years ago it meant weekly. And then when we legalized, it started meaning daily. But now I talk to kids every day who say, I use 5 or 6 times a day. We are talking use rates that we have never seen before. Let's go to the next one. So at the top of this graph is the highest youth use rates in the nation, and that's the state of Colorado. By the way, the light blue are states that have no legalization. The medium blue, it's a little hard to see, but the medium blue are states that have medical marijuana, and then the dark blue are recreational marijuana. We were never at the top of this chart before until we legalized. Now, you'll also hear youth use has gone down in Colorado, so it's working well. Well, those numbers are based on one survey, and that's called the Healthy Kids Colorado Survey. You can go look it up, find the article, and it'll see based on the Healthy Kids Colorado Survey. It's a survey that's voluntary. It's not mandatory. It's done every other year on odd grade years, 7th, 9th, and 11th grades. It's voluntary. They change the criteria on this survey all the time, so it's never consistent year to year, so it's hard to measure. But in the year they're saying that marijuana use went down, the 5 largest school districts in the state of Colorado chose not to engage. So that's Denver County, that's Jefferson County, which is the entire area from Denver to the mountains, the largest school district in the state. It actually has 4 sub-districts, it's so huge. Boulder chose not to participate. Colorado Springs chose not to participate, second largest school district in the state, as did Pueblo. Now, I told you about Colorado geography at the very beginning. If you leave out all of the major school districts in the state and then do a statewide survey, who's left? That's like surveying the entire state of Illinois and leaving out Chicago and thinking that's an accurate representation, right? We're going to survey crime in Illinois, but Chicago's not going to participate. We have no crime here, right? Is that accurate? So this is what this survey represented, was a lack of data, and then they amalgamated the data. Even though that raw data shows increased uses in high school, there was such low uses in middle school that they put it all together, averaged it out, and said, oh my goodness, youth use went down. It has gone out all over the world. People believe it to be true. There's billboards in states pushing for legalization that said youth use went down, legalization works. It's a lie. According to the National Survey of Drug Use and Health, we are the highest youth rates in the nation. Let's go to the next slide. Here we have an increase in drug violations for students during the 2015-16 school year. Our expulsions were increasing until the Colorado Department of Education said, look, we're expelling too many kids. We can't have schools that don't have any kids in them. So you're no longer allowed to expel students for marijuana. You just have to suspend them or make them do like in-school separation. So expulsions dropped, but not because marijuana offenses went down, because we stopped expelling. However, referrals to law enforcement went up and suspensions went up. And then let's go to the next one. Look at high school dropout rates. We had a problem with high school dropout rates, but we started working hard to keep retention in school, because kids do better when they graduate from high school and they're less likely to go to jail. So we saw a slight drop because we were working very, very hard on that program. And then we get legal marijuana, we shoot straight back up. Let's go to the next one. All right, average toxicology of suicides among adolescents ages 10 to 19 years old. These are those that we have done a known toxicology report on. Not all autopsies, not all deaths are autopsied, and not all autopsies include a drug panel. Here you have by substance and the years that are involved. And you can see you have the antidepressants and the opioids up at the top. Cocaine is smaller, amphetamines, alcohol is quite large, definitely concerning. And then you have marijuana, which outweighs every other substance. And by the way, the blue is in the years of commercialization, and then the red is 2009 to 2012, and then the green is 2013 to current. So you have this toxicology of kids who complete suicide. So what is this about? We have increased mental health diagnosis, 688% increase of mental health diagnosis amongst our young kids who are using marijuana. Our mental health system is overloaded. Our drug treatment centers are overloaded. It's hard to get kids in, to get them treated, because we have absolutely exploded. And unfortunately, these are cases where we've had kids who have completed suicide. How devastating. So let's go to the next one. Vape pens that I told you about, e-cigarettes. The number one market for those vape pens are kids in junior high school. You have products over here with cartoon characters on them that are directly marketed to children. 9% of 8th graders say they've vaped in the past 30 days. 9% of 8th graders say they have vaped in the past 30 days. So here you have almost 60% of new marijuana users each year are under the age of 18. Now, I want to remind you that we were able to nail big tobacco to the wall for marketing to kids. Do you remember when they had to stop using Joe Camel? I lived right here in the Chicago area, and I remember all the Joe Camel billboards getting torn down, because I thought a Camel's not going to make me want to buy a cigarette, but I get it. I get what we were trying to do. So let's look at the playbook for big tobacco for a minute. How many of you remember that more doctors use Camels? Do you remember those ads? How many of you remember your dentist prefers Viceroys, right? So these were ads that were running in the 60s. You can look them up. In fact, most of you don't know this, but now that those are not allowed in the U.S., they've repurposed them, updated them, and they're running those ads in third world countries. So why did they do that? Because medical efficacy, right? If we can get medical efficacy, then people will go, oh, this is good for me. And there's a history here. We have, I have some slides in another presentation, Dr. Batty's asthma cigarettes that cure bronchial ails. not recommended for children under 8 years of age, right? So that was the first step. Get it medically accepted. The second step was now create a new market that lasts a lifetime, 10 to 12-year-olds. Marijuana is marketing 8 to 12-year-olds. And I'll show you some slides in a minute that will show you that. And then, once you get that market, you have lifetime users, you normalize it, and now, so there's an ashtray on every coffee table. My dad was a Baptist preacher for most of my life, and when my mom's family came to visit, we had an ashtray on the coffee table. And let me tell you something, cigarettes were bad sin in my childhood. But when Uncle Chuck came to visit, there was a ashtray on the coffee table. So we normalized it. There were ashtrays everywhere in every restaurant. What's marijuana doing? Medical efficacy, marketing to children, normalization. Legalization is not about tax and regulate. It's about normalize so that we numb ourselves to it and everyone accepts it. Let's go to the next one. So these are ads that we see in Colorado. Here's one in the cannabis, Santa Claus. He's got little marijuana leaves falling out of his pack. Fred Flintstone up there is Yabba Dabba Do. Here you have an advertisement with Jimi Hendrix. This says 20% off everything with a student ID. Here's show your ski pass and receive $1 joint. Let's go to the next one. Look at the candies, the fruity candies, lollipops, Nugtella. It's a marijuana version of Nutella. It's a ripoff. Klondike bars. Chronic is a brand of marijuana, and so this is marijuana ice cream. These are marijuana sodas right here, 4 servings per bottle. Let's go to the next one. Actually, go back, sorry. I thought there was another edible slide. So, okay, what I want to say about these candies, and you're going to hear this, so I want to tell you the truth. These gummy bears are a minimum of 4 servings of marijuana per gummy bear. So how many of you know a kid who will eat a quarter of a gummy bear and stop? Or an adult, okay? Well, these were such a problem, and we've had so many kids getting poisoned by these things and ending up in the emergency room that we now passed a law that you can't have candy in the shape of people or animals because that's attractive to children. Okay, so what about the candy ropes and the peach rings and the watermelon slices? Are those attractive to children? Well, we change shape. So why would children want those, right? So the logic here is it's just ridiculous. And then you have lollipops, and sometimes I'll say this. So how many, I want you to raise your hand really high if sometime in the last 30 days you have said, you know, I have got to have a lollipop. And you went and bought yourself a lollipop. Raise it up. I want to see it. Oh, none of you? None of you? Maybe, how about in the last 6 months? One guy. You needed a lollipop in the last 6 months. Okay, props. Okay, so these products are made for children. Let's go on. I want you to see a billboard, free dab. If you buy a glass product at a glass store, buy one, get one free on pipes. This is in Lakewood, Colorado. You can't see that too well. Right over the top of Lakewood High School. Now, we called Lakewood High School and we said we want to come talk to the kids about, you know, how marijuana impacts their brain and it's not safe. And they said, no, thank you, we don't have a problem. 1 year later, they called me up and they said, we need you here and we need you bad and we want you to come meet with our principals and staff first. So I went and I sat down with them and they said, our freshman kids are using dabs every day because they get them for $1 down the street at the retail store and we have an epidemic and we don't know what to do. You think commercialization doesn't work for kids, you're wrong. Let's go to the next one. These are more ads. Open up the back of a newspaper. Over and over and over again. Every one of these ads is for pot. Let's go to the next one. I like to show this one because here is you get a free marijuana eighth or edible of choice if you have an appliance repair. Right? Again, with the cartoon characters. You can see all the cartoon characters and the free products. And let's go to the next one. This is a marijuana dispensary in my community. The painted Cookie Monster on the side, and his little chocolate chip cookies have marijuana leaves all over them. And then these, if you could see them really clearly, those are 3 brands of Girl Scout cookies with little marijuana leaves on them. Okay, completely attractive to children. Look at these products here for children, all of these. So we're marketing to those little ones. Let's go to the next one. So what do we have now? Colorado Children's Hospital says marijuana ingestion among children under 9 years of age. Look at these numbers. Whoosh, goes straight up. And I want to tell you something about these ingestions. We call them accidental poisonings, is how we refer to them. These can shut down a child's system. They stop breathing on their own. They have to be intubated. We've had at least one child that was unconscious for 4 days, 4 or 5 days. Let's say 4 days, just so that I'm not exaggerating, because I really do not want to do that. I asked the guys in the marijuana industry who I was serving on the task force with, are you guys going to take responsibility for this? Are you going to do some kind of public service campaign? Are you going to, educate people that this is dangerous? And they said, why should we do that? That kid's okay. Now, if I did something that put my child in the hospital for 4 days unconscious, would I get away with it? But it seems like when it's pot, it's okay. Let's go to the next one. We have an epidemic of pregnant women using marijuana for nausea all 9 months. I didn't know so many women had 9 months of nausea. In Pueblo, Colorado, over 50% of babies born are THC positive. We know that marijuana crosses the placental boundary. We also know that it excretes in breast milk. And we have a few studies that tell us the long-term outcomes up to 8-9 years of age, but we haven't been able to get any further than that yet, so we don't know the long-term consequences. What we see already are smaller head sizes, smaller brain sizes, inability to pay attention in school, and a proclivity to addiction already. So I'm telling you that in 10 more years, we're going to have something similar to fetal alcohol syndrome that is cannabis-related, and our public health system cannot keep up with the pregnant women enough to get them educated to stop using this product, because the marijuana industry pushes it and pushes it and pushes it as a safe, natural remedy for them. Let's go to the next one. Traffic crashes. We could talk about this one in and of itself all night, but we won't. 1 in 5 marijuana users in the state report driving after using marijuana. There is a strong perception that it's safer to drive with marijuana in your system than alcohol. The other problem that we have is people who use marijuana have a tendency not to understand how impaired they are. The part of the brain that gets shut off when you use pot says, you need more to eat, and it shuts off all of your inhibitions. It actually tells you that you're sober. And so we have people driving, and so let's go to the next one and see what those outcomes are. Colorado State Patrol says 76% of total DUIDs, that's driving under the influence of drugs in our state, involve marijuana. This means there could be marijuana and other drugs or alcohol. 38% of those DUIDs involve marijuana only. These are actual pictures of crashes I'm showing you that were marijuana-related fatalities. And so when you hear marijuana is safer than alcohol, right, one thing I want you to understand about this is that the marijuana industry gets away with saying that because of a lack of data, not because it's based on the truth. The World Health Organization defines defines deaths related to alcohol as any alcohol-related death. So that sounds like, Joe, you're speaking in riddles. So what I mean by that, if a woman is killed in a domestic violence incident and her husband is drunk, that's a death related to alcohol, according to the World Health Organization. Cirrhosis of the liver is an alcohol-related death. Alcohol-related traffic crashes are alcohol-related deaths. But guess what? The World Health Organization has never kept statistics on marijuana because it's an illicit drug. The lack of data does not make it safer, right? So to say we have no deaths related to marijuana is patently false, untrue, and a lie. Let's go to the next one. I keep clicking. I'm clicking for nothing. Okay, so traffic deaths related to marijuana when an operator tested positive for marijuana. Look how this went up from 2006, 37. Then we increased by 10 in the year of commercialization. We started dropping in 1 year, then we legalized it that year, and we went straight up to 147 in that year. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so almost 1/3 of 18 to 24-year-olds are using marijuana in Colorado. So we went from the teen use The driving, now we're looking at young adults, college students. By the way, I really need to mention here that we have significant data that shows that when adolescents use marijuana, when the brain is in development, it shrinks the corpus callosum of the brain, the white matter in the middle, and it's permanent shrinkage. It doesn't heal over the lifetime of the individual, even when they stop using. So when you permanently change the structure of the brain and you shrink it, that's called brain damage. That brain damage can cost a child between 6 and 8 IQ points lost for life. Now you may say, 6 or 8 points, what's the big deal? And honestly, for some kids, that may not be a big deal. We have some incredibly bright kids, and maybe they could stand to lose 8 IQ points. But for most kids, that can mean the difference between having a professional white-collar career and working in a gas station or serving food the rest of their life. It is that significant, never regained. Let's go to the next one. Enrollment in substance use treatment. Single-day counts. Here we've seen a sharp spike in the need for treatment and rehabilitation. Let's go to the next one. I want you to understand that the Denver's Visitor Bureau submitted a report that said we have lost 50% of conference planners who bring conferences to the state of Colorado and the city of Denver because they have said the marijuana is so pervasive, 50% of our conferences will no longer schedule in the city of Denver. And they list, and you can read the comments, it's an incredible report. They list the stench, the smell is everywhere, the crime. Denver's now a scary place to walk down the street. Didn't used to have that. The aggressive homeless people. We're attracting homeless people like you would not believe. And the filth, the dirt that's everywhere. So this is pretty significant. And so when I mention the homeless, we now have what we call marijuana refugees. We've attracted a huge subsection. In fact, again, I want to go back to the city of Pueblo. The city of Pueblo, population 160,000, now has 15,000 homeless people. Over 10% of their city's population are on the public assistance rolls because they came to Colorado to use pot. They don't have any interest in working or contributing to the state. They're there because it's a mecca for marijuana. So they're setting up tent cities. So we now have tent cities in Denver, in Colorado Springs, in Pueblo, and several other communities. And some of these have thousands of people in them. There's other issues that go along with that. This over here on the left is a picture of what this is right in front of the Denver State Capitol. So the building that you see on the far side is what you look out when you look out at the Capitol building. And this was a 420 celebration, celebrating legal marijuana. And so they got permits to come downtown and have a public smoke out, civil disobedience, smoking in public on April 20th. It's a big marijuana holiday. It's coming up, so be ready. And the filth that was left after several years finally caused our city to say, we just can't afford this anymore, so we're not going to give you any more permits. Let's go to the next one. In the workplace, in the first year after legalization, Colorado and Washington were both at the national average of 6% positive THC test for employees. In year one, we tripled that number and went up to 20%. The state of Washington went up to 24%, 4 times the national average. That has not dropped at all. And incidentally, for the first time in 2 decades, positive tests for all other illicit drugs also increased in those years. When you hear that marijuana will solve the opiates crisis, you need to understand that it has not solved the opiates crisis in Colorado. We have as many opioid deaths, heroin deaths. We still have the heroin, opiate, and methamphetamine epidemic. But what has happened is the prescription writing for opioids has gone down. So we have less doctors writing prescriptions, but more people using marijuana. Let's go to the next one. So in adults ages 26 and older, the blue line is the national average of marijuana use. The red line is the adult use in the state of Colorado. Let's go to the next one. I just want to tell you this story that One of our challenges in the workplace are finding qualified applicants who can pass the pre-employment drug screen. So here's an electric company that had 12 applicants. My friend Chuck came in to do mobile drug testing. 9 people saw the logo on his shirt and got up and walked out. No, thank you. 3 took the test, 2 passed, 1 failed for THC positive. Now, this happened in 2015. So why did I leave this up here? Because it's old news. Well, this company said this is such a pain, we're going to stop doing pre-employment testing, and in fact, we're going to stop doing random testing because we just won't keep our employees. Now, they still do post-accident testing because you get breaks on workers' comp in our state if you get a positive post-accident test. So they called Chuck up this last December, just a few months ago, and they said, we've got a guy who started an arc flash fire. He's severely burned over most of his body. He's in the emergency room. We want the post-accident test. So Chuck goes out, and the man refuses. And so if you've ever had a workplace drug test, you know refusal is a big deal. You're pretty much admitting that you're at fault. Well, he left, and he called the company, and they said, we're going to talk him into it. So 3 days later, they called him up, and they said, he's ready to do the test. We need you to go back out there. Chuck goes out to the hospital room of this man. He's all bandaged up. And the man tries to cheat his drug test with a fake urine specimen. So Chuck is a former cop. He's a drug recognition expert, and he catches the man cheating his drug test. And he says, no, this isn't going to fly, so let's do an oral fluid swab. And the only thing that came up positive, of course, was THC. And so the company said, well, maybe we should start doing our random drug testing program again. Now, I don't think that the company caused this accident because they stopped their drug testing program, but I do believe that this accident could have been prevented, possibly had they stuck to their policies and kept them in place. We have G.E. Johnson, one of the largest construction companies in the state of Colorado, that says when we get jobs where we get federal dollars, like repairing roads and bridges, and we have to have a drug-free workforce by federal mandate, we have to hire people from outside of the state in order to get enough workers to complete the jobs. In southern Colorado, paid construction says for every 75 people we interview, we can find about 15 who can pass the drug test. Now, what's interesting about that paragraph right there is the word interview. That's people that they've interviewed. How many of you have to interview new applicants in your job? So many. Okay, does it take forever? Like, that is time and money. The average small business loses $7,000 per month in lost revenue due to employee substance use. For marijuana users, we have increased accidents, injuries, employee turnover, absenteeism, lost productivity. And so here's just a little piece of where that money is just flowing out the back end. But the more concerning one to me is the Canyon City Workforce Center. This is the state's unemployment office that's trying to get people jobs. And they said it took us 2 months to find 3 CDL drivers that could pass the drug test. What's wrong with that statement right there? Does anybody see it?
Probably, it took 2 months to clear the system.
CDL drivers. What does that mean? Commercial driver's license operators, big rigs. So remember at the beginning I told you about mandated drug testing for DOT employees? That's these guys. And DOT says 0 tolerance for medical marijuana or recreational marijuana, and they have made it very well known. And these guys don't get their license to operate if they don't know this and abide by it. 2 months to find 3 drivers that could pass the drug test. That's a problem because it's trickling into our DOT. Now, everybody wants to know, this is the hot topic, what about the money? What about the money? Illinois needs the money. We got to solve this money crisis. So everything you say, okay, we can regulate our way out of it like we do with opioids, right? So we'll regulate our way out of it, but we want that money. So here in fiscal year 2016, that little red line is the total income that we got with recreational and medical marijuana combined. We added them up together just to give them the benefit of the doubt. and it's less than 1% of our entire state budget. Now, someone said to me the other day, every little bit helps. Okay, let's talk about every little bit. Let's go to the next slide. ER costs, we had a study of ER costs from 2006 to 2008, and the median charge for outpatient conditions in the emergency room was $1,233 for the average ER visit. Now, diagnoses related to cannabis at one hospital increased from 545 to 2,042. We had a 275% increase between 2009 and 2014. Okay, so these are all excellent things here that we're going to look at, but also note, emergency department charges unable to be collected increased 192%. Those are our indigents who are coming in and going to the ER. So $1,200 per ER visit. Let's go to the next one. So here we have just on marijuana-related emergency department visits alone, 18,255. That's a loss of $22,500,000. Let's go to the next slide. Economic cost of vehicle accidents resulting in fatalities. So we get this number from the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, NHTSA. And they average out what the average traffic fatality costs, and they also have a national average for a first-time DUI offense and how much that costs. So we took the total economic cost here, $1,398,000 and $10,270 for a fatality and for a DUI. So let's go on. So in 13, 14, and 15, the first 3 years of legalization, this was the total number of statewide fatalities only. I'm not talking about the DUIs. I'm talking about only the fatalities. And we put that cost together, and what we have is a cost of $2.12 billion. Our greatest tax revenue year to date, $104 million. Are we going to bring in the money? Are we going to bleed more out? And that's the truth you're not getting from Governor Hickenlooper, who refuses to form a coalition to study the costs. He says we cannot capture the data. But I'll tell you what, I'm not good at math, and I captured that pretty easily. So I think it's possible. Okay, let's go to the next one. And this is the last slide. So things that I feel that Illinoisans should consider when you're looking at this policy. What are the public health and safety priorities? Do you have an educational curricula and campaigns and programs for youth? We are 6 years in, all told, and we have no educational curricula for our kids. We haven't found anything that works. Are you protecting vulnerable age groups like your toddlers and your teenagers? No ability to opt out in your state? How to manage home grow violations? What are you going to do about that? Parameters for open marketing to youth? What are you going to do about that? Potential for growth in your homeless population, zoning that respects all community members, like your poor and needy populations, safe driving messages. This is something we've spent hundreds of millions of dollars on. Emergency services preparedness, assistance and education for safe and drug-free workplaces. These are all things that we are failing, and we don't have any resources to offer you. And that's our experience that we're bringing to you, and everybody's touting as the best system in the world. I feel in many ways like I've barely scratched the surface, believe it or not, but I'm not going to keep going.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.